I watched my wife drag a black sack into the water at 3:11 in the morning, and I did nothing to stop her. I should have called out. Should have run down the bank, grabbed her arm, demanded to know what was in the sack and why she was standing ankle-deep in Clearwater Lake in the dark on a Monday in October. I should have done any of the things a husband does when he sees his wife doing something that makes his blood turn to ice. But I didn't. I stood behind a stand of birch trees 40 yards from the shore, watching through the gaps in the white bark, and I said nothing. Because my legs wouldn't move, because my voice wouldn't come, because some part of my brain that controls rational thought had shut down completely, replaced by a single, pulsing, all-consuming terror that said, "You are watching your wife dispose of something that should never be found." The sack was heavy. She was struggling with it. Deborah Blackwell is 5'6", 140 pounds, strong for her size from years of wrangling 80-pound dogs onto examination tables at the vet clinic. But whatever was in that sack was testing her limits. She had both arms wrapped around it, her back bent, her feet sliding in the mud at the water's edge. She grunted, a sound I had never heard from my wife in 23 years of marriage, a sound of raw physical effort that belonged in a warehouse, not on a lakeshore at 3 a.m. She pushed the sack into the water. It didn't float. It sank immediately, pulling the surface down with it like a mouth swallowing. She stood there for a moment, breathing hard, her arms hanging at her sides, staring at the spot where the sack had gone under. Then she turned, walked back to her car, got in and drove away. I stayed behind the birch trees. My hands were shaking so badly that when I pulled out my phone, I dropped it in the leaves twice before I could hold it steady enough to dial. 911, what's your emergency? My name is Perry Blackwell. I'm at Clearwater Lake, off county. Road 4, Wright County of Minnesota. I just watched someone dump something in the water. Can you describe what you saw, sir? A person, dragging a black sack, heavy. They pushed it into the lake. It sank. Can you describe the person? I closed my eyes, opened them. The words came out like stones dropped one at a time into a well. It was my wife. But I need to go back. I need to go back to 2:47 a.m., 24 minutes before the sack hit the water, when I woke up in my bed in our house on Elm Street in Monticello, Minnesota, and reached for my wife and found cold sheets. I am a light sleeper, have been my whole life. My father was the same way. He said it was because Blackwell men are built to notice things, which is probably why I became a building inspector and he became a firefighter, and his father before him was a night watchman at the Cargill plant outside of town. We are men who wake up when something is wrong, even when we don't know what it is. The bed was empty. Deborah's side was cold, which meant she'd been gone for at least 15 or 20 minutes. The bathroom was dark. The hallway was dark, but from the bedroom window I could see the garage door closing. I looked out. Deborah's car, a 2020 gray Toyota RAV4, was backing out of the driveway. No headlights at 2:47 in the morning. People turn off their headlights when they don't want to be seen. That's not speculation. That's not paranoia. That's a fact I learned from 22 years of building inspections, where I've seen every kind of deception people practice when they don't want someone to notice what they're doing. Hidden rooms, sealed-off basements, unpermitted construction behind false walls. People who have nothing to hide don't build false walls, and people who have nothing to hide don't drive without headlights at 3 a.m. I pulled on jeans and a jacket, grabbed my keys, and followed her. Monticello is a town of about 14,000 people, 40 miles northwest of Minneapolis, sitting on the Mississippi River in Wright County. It's the kind of place where people know each other's trucks, where the high school football games are the social event of the week, and where a man who has lived here for 23 years and inspected half the buildings in the county can drive the roads in his sleep. I knew exactly where Deborah was going the moment she turned onto County Road 4. There's only one thing on County Road 4 past the Gustafson Farm, Clearwater Lake. A mid-sized lake surrounded by state forest, popular for fishing in the summer, empty and dark in October. The kind of place that's beautiful at noon and terrifying at midnight. I followed at a distance, my headlights off too now, driving by moonlight and muscle memory. She pulled onto the service road that leads to the boat launch on the north shore. I pulled off onto the shoulder behind a stand of birch trees, killed the engine, and walked through the woods until I could see the water, and then I watched. I've already told you what I saw: the sack, the struggle, the water swallowing it. Deborah standing on the shore, breathing, staring, then leaving. What I haven't told you is what went through my mind during the 4 minutes and 30 seconds it took her to drag the sack from the trunk of her RAV4 to the water's edge and push it under. The first thought was the obvious one. Someone is dead, and my wife killed them. The sack was the right size. The weight was right. The location was right. Remote, dark, deep water. Everything my brain was processing pointed to one conclusion: the conclusion that any person would reach watching someone dump a heavy black sack into a lake at 3 a.m. The second thought was worse. Lyle, Deborah's brother. The addict who had drained our family emotionally and financially for over a decade. The man who had gotten clean in 2016, stayed clean for 6 years, and then, according to the last conversation Deborah and I had about him, was doing fine, staying out of trouble. What if doing fine was a lie? What if Lyle had done something, or had something done to him, and Deborah was cleaning up the mess the way she had cleaned up Lyle's messes for their entire adult lives? The third thought was the one that made me dial 911. If my wife has done something terrible and I saw it and said nothing, then I am complicit. Whatever is in that sack, whatever Deborah has done, the truth needs to come out. Not because I want it to, because hiding it would make me the kind of person I have spent my entire career exposing, the kind who builds false walls. I don't build false walls, I tear them down. That's my job. The deputies arrived at 4:03 a.m. 2 patrol cars, lights flashing, bouncing off the water in the birch trees. Deputy Holt Granger was the first one out, 38 years old, built like a middle linebacker, with the calm efficiency of a man who had responded to enough late-night calls to know that most of them were nothing and some of them were everything. "Mr. Blackwell?" "That's me." "You called in a report of something being dumped in the lake." "Yes." "And you said it was your wife." "Yes." He looked at me. I could see the assessment happening. Is this guy credible? Is this a domestic dispute? Is this a man trying to get his wife in trouble? I understood the look. I would have done the same thing. "Can you show me where?" I led them to the spot on the shore where Deborah had entered the water. Her footprints were still visible in the mud, sneaker treads, size 7, sinking deep under the weight of whatever she had been carrying. The tracks led from the road to the water in a straight line, the kind of purposeful path that said this wasn't spontaneous. She had been here before. She knew exactly where to go. Granger radioed for a dive team. Then he turned to me. "Mr. Blackwell, I need to ask you some questions while we wait." "I understand." "When did you last see your wife before tonight?" "At 10:30 p.m. We watched the news together. She went to bed around 11. I stayed up reading until about midnight." "Any unusual behavior recently? Anything that concerned you?" I thought about it, really thought about it. And the answer that came surprised me, because it was yes. There had been things. Small things, the kind that a building inspector notices because noticing is what we do. Deborah had been distracted for months. Not in the way that means unhappy or unfaithful. I knew those signs. Had seen them in enough marriages during my years inspecting homes where the tension between the owners was as visible as a crack in the foundation. This was different. She was preoccupied, stressed. She had lost weight, maybe 15 pounds over the past year, slowly enough that I hadn't registered it as a single event, but noticeable now that I was cataloging the changes. She had been protective of her phone, not hiding it exactly, but keeping it close, turning the screen away when texts came in, taking calls in the other room. I had attributed it to work. The vet clinic was busy, staffing issues, the annual fundraiser taking up her evenings, and money had been tighter. I noticed that too. We weren't poor. My salary plus hers was about $120,000 a year. But over the past year there had been conversations about cutting back, canceling the trip to see Gentry at NC State for Parents' Weekend, postponing the roof repair on the garage. "We're fine. she said whenever I asked, just being smart. I told Granger all of this. He wrote it down without expression. Any idea what might be in the sack? No? Any idea why your wife would be out here at 3 a.m.? No. Has your wife ever done anything like this before? My wife has never done anything remotely like this before. She's a vet office manager. She organizes animal shelter fundraisers. She makes casseroles for neighbors who are sick. She is the most normal person I have ever known. Normal people don't usually dump things in lakes at 3 a.m., Mr. Blackwell. I know. That's why I called you. The dive team arrived at 4:38 a.m. 3 divers in wetsuits, a boat, underwater lights. Clearwater Lake is about 60 feet deep in the center, but the north shore where Deborah had entered slopes gradually. The sack hadn't gone far. The divers found it in about 12 feet of water, resting on the silty bottom, approximately 15 yards from shore. They brought it up at 4:52 a.m. The sack was a black contractor-grade garbage bag, doubled for strength, sealed with duct tape. It was heavy. One of the divers estimated 50 pounds. They set it on the shore, cut the tape, and opened it. Inside was a metal box, a small fireproof safe, the kind you buy at an office supply store for important documents. Around it, stuffed into the gaps, were rocks, lake rocks, smooth and flat, added for weight. Deputy Granger looked at the safe, looked at me, looked back at the safe. "This isn't what I expected," he said. "Me neither." They pried the safe open with a tool from the patrol car. Inside, everything was soaked. The seal wasn't designed for submersion, but the contents were identifiable. Bank statements. Dozens of them. From our joint savings account, from a personal account in Deborah's name that I didn't know existed, from a retirement fund I hadn't checked in over a year. Loan documents. A personal loan for $30,000 in Deborah's name, taken out in March 2023, with a bank in St. Cloud I had never heard of. Cash withdrawal receipts. Dozens of them. $2,000 here. $3,500 there. $5,000. $4,200. $6,000. Spanning 18 months, totaling, I couldn't add it up in my head, but the stack was thick. 2 burner phones. Cheap prepaid devices, the kind you buy at Walmart and throw away, and a handwritten ledger. A small spiral notebook, the kind Deborah used for grocery lists, filled with entries in her careful handwriting. Dates, dollar amounts, and a name I didn't recognize. Knox Everett. Deputy Granger was reading the ledger over the shoulder of the diver who was holding it. I watched his face change. The professional calm dissolved. His eyes widened. His jaw tightened. He took a step back, looked at the other deputy, and whispered 2 words. "Oh, God." Not the "oh, God" of finding a body, not the "oh, God" of horror. The "oh, God" of a law enforcement officer who has just stumbled onto something he has been looking for a very long time. "Get Detective Fuentes on the phone," Granger said to the other deputy. "Right now. Tell her it's about Knox Everett." I stood on the shore of Clearwater Lake at 5 a.m. on a Monday in October, watching a deputy make an urgent phone call about a name I had never heard, holding bank statements that proved my wife had been draining our family's finances for 18 months, and I understood exactly nothing about what was happening. No body, no blood, no crime scene in the way I had feared. Just paper. Just numbers. Just evidence of a deception so comprehensive, so meticulously documented that my wife had risked everything to destroy it. And the question that replaced every other question in my mind was not what did she do, but why. They picked Deborah up at the house at 5:30 a.m. She had gotten home before the deputies arrived. I know, because Granger told me later that she was in bed, pretending to sleep, still wearing the sneakers she had worn to the lake. She hadn't even taken off her shoes. She had crawled into bed fully dressed and pulled the covers up to her chin and closed her eyes, as if sleep could erase what she had done. They brought her to the Wright County Sheriff's Office in Buffalo, 14 miles from Monticello. They put us in separate rooms. I sat in mine for 2 hours, drinking bad coffee, staring at the wall, running through every possibility my mind could generate. An affair? The burner phone suggested secret communication. But the bank statement suggested money, not romance, and the name Knox Everett meant nothing to me. Gambling? Deborah didn't gamble, didn't play cards, didn't buy lottery tickets. The woman budgeted our grocery spending to the dollar. Blackmail? Someone had something on her and she was paying to keep it quiet? I kept coming back to Lyle. Deborah's brother, the addict, the man who had consumed more of our emotional energy over the past decade than any other single person in our lives. Lyle Tolbert was 43 years old. He had been a good electrician before the opioids took him. A workplace injury in 2013, a fall from a ladder at a job site in Elk River, had led to a prescription for OxyContin that had led to a dependency that had led to everything that dependencies lead to. Lost jobs, lost relationships, lost years. Deborah had fought for him through all of it. Rehab in 2014. Relapse in 2015. Another rehab. Another relapse. The cycle that families of addicts know like a prayer they can't stop saying. And then, in 2016, something had clicked. Lyle got clean, stayed clean, got a job, got an apartment, started rebuilding. In 2016, Deborah had asked me to lend Lyle $15,000 to help him get settled. I agreed, reluctantly. When Lyle missed the first repayment, I confronted him. The conversation went badly. I told him I was done enabling him. I told Deborah that not another dollar of our money was going to Lyle. She agreed, or I thought she agreed. Lyle stayed clean for 6 years. 6 years. Long enough that I stopped worrying. Long enough that I stopped asking Deborah how he was doing, because the answer was always, fine, he's doing fine. Long enough that I forgot the fundamental truth about addiction that every family member learns eventually. Clean doesn't mean cured. It means waiting. At 7:15 a.m., Detective Anita Fuentes arrived. She was 45, compact, intense, with the focused energy of a woman who had spent years building a case and had just been handed the final piece at 5 a.m. on a Monday. She came to my room first. "Mr. Blackwell, I'm Detective Fuentes. I need to tell you some things, and then I need to ask you some things, and I need you to be completely honest with me." I've been sitting here for 2 hours being completely honest with myself. You'll get the same. She sat down, opened a folder. What I'm about to tell you is going to be difficult to hear. It can't be worse than what I've been imagining. It's not what you're imagining, it's not a body, it's not a murder, it's not what you think. Then what is it? Your wife has been making payments to a man named Knox Everett for approximately 18 months. The total amount, based on the records we recovered from the lake, is approximately $94,000. The number hit me like a truck running a red light. $94,000. From where? We didn't have $94,000. We had savings, maybe $40,000 last time I checked, and retirement and Deborah's income, but $94,000 was almost our entire annual take-home pay. Who is Knox Everett? Knox Everett is a predatory lender operating out of the Sherburne County area. He targets people who can't access traditional financial services, addicts, gamblers, people with debt they can't manage through legitimate channels. He charges interest rates that would make a loan shark blush, and he enforces repayment through intimidation and threats. We've been building a case against him for 2 years, but we've never had sufficient documentation of his operations until tonight. Why was Deborah paying him? That's what I need to ask her. But based on the records, the payments correspond with the debt originated by someone named Lyle Tolbert. She looked at me. Your brother-in-law. I closed my eyes. Lyle. Mr. Blackwell, did you know your brother-in-law had relapsed? No. Did you know your wife was in contact with Knox Everett? No. Did you know your wife had taken out a $30,000 personal loan, withdrawn approximately $40,000 from your joint savings, and made an early withdrawal of approximately $24,000 from her retirement fund? Each number was a hammer blow. Each one landed on a different part of the structure I had built over 23 years of marriage, the trust, the partnership, the belief that I knew who my wife was and what our life looked like from the inside. Blow after blow after blow, and I could feel the structure cracking. No, I said. I didn't know any of it. Would you like to speak with your wife? Yes. They brought Deborah to my room. Detective Fuentes stayed, seated in the corner, observing. Deborah walked in wearing the jeans and sweatshirt she had worn to the lake, her sneakers still muddy, her hair unwashed, her eyes red and swollen. She looked like a woman who had been awake for 2 days, which she probably had, because people who are about to dump evidence in a lake don't sleep well the night before. She sat across from me, the metal table between us, the fluorescent light above us, the detective in the corner, and 23 years of marriage compressed into the 2 feet of space between our hands on the table. Tell me, I said. She told me. Lyle had relapsed in December 2022. A back surgery in November had reintroduced painkillers, and the addiction that had been sleeping for 6 years woke up hungry. Within 2 months, he was back on opioids. Within 4 months, he had lost his apartment, his job, and his savings. He had gone to Knox Everett for money, $12,000 initially to cover rent and buy time. But Everett's interest rates were not rates, they were traps. 35% monthly, compounding. Within 6 months, the $12,000 had become $87,000. He called me in March 2023, Deborah said. Her voice was flat, exhausted, the voice of a woman who had been carrying a weight so heavy that setting it down felt less like relief and more like collapse. He was crying. He said Everett's people had threatened him, said they would hurt him if he didn't pay. He begged me, Perry. He begged me the way he used to beg when we were kids, and Dad was drunk, and Lyle would hide in my closet and ask me to make it stop. So you paid. I paid. The first time, it was $5,000 from our savings. I told myself it was a one-time thing, that I'd pay this one debt and Lyle would get clean and I'd put the money back before you noticed. But it wasn't one time. No. Everett kept adding interest, and Lyle kept needing more. And every time I thought it was almost over, there was another payment, another threat, another phone call in the middle of the night. I took out the personal loan in my name. I raided my retirement. I drained the savings. And I kept it all in that safe because I needed to track every dollar, every payment, every receipt, so that I could prove what I'd paid if Everett ever claimed I hadn't. Why didn't you tell me? She looked at me, and the look on her face was the answer before the words came. Because you told me no more money, for Lyle. You told me you were done. You told me in 2017 that if Lyle ever came to us again, you would walk away, and I believed you, so I had a choice, tell you and lose you, or hide it and save my brother. You chose Lyle. I chose both. I was trying to save both. I was trying to keep Lyle alive and keep our marriage intact, and I know now that I couldn't do both. But at the time, Perry, at the time it felt like the only option I had. And the lake? Why dump the evidence? Because I made the last payment 2 weeks ago. It's done. The debt is paid. Lyle is in treatment. His 4th time, I know, but this time he went voluntarily. And I wanted it all gone. Every statement, every receipt, every burner phone I used to talk to Everett. I wanted to throw it in the water and pretend it never happened. But I followed you. But you followed me. She almost smiled. The saddest smile I have ever seen on a human face. You're a building inspector, Perry. You notice everything. I should have known you'd notice the one time I left the house at 3 a.m. I sat there looking at my wife. Not a murderer, not a criminal, a sister. A sister who had spent 18 months bleeding herself dry to keep her brother alive, who had lied to the person she loved most because she believed the truth would cost her everything, who had driven to a lake in the dark and tried to drown the evidence of her love, because love, when it's desperate enough, looks exactly like a crime. Detective Fuentes spoke from the corner. Mrs. Blackwell, the records you kept, the ledger, the receipts, the phone records, these document Knox Everett's predatory lending operation in detail that we have never been able to obtain through our own investigation. Your meticulous record-keeping may be the key to shutting down an operation that has victimized dozens of people. Deborah looked at her. I wasn't trying to build a case, I was trying to survive. I understand, but the result is the same. We'd like you to cooperate with our investigation. In exchange, we can recommend immunity from any charges related to the financial transactions. Charges? I paid off my brother's drug debt. I didn't commit a crime. You attempted to destroy evidence by dumping it in a lake, which could constitute obstruction. But given the circumstances and the value of the evidence to our investigation, I don't think any prosecutor would pursue it. She paused. Mrs. Blackwell, your records are going to help a lot of people. People like your brother, who were exploited by a man who preys on the vulnerable. Deborah looked at me. Perry, cooperate, I said. Tell them everything. She did. Over the next 3 weeks, Deborah worked with Detective Fuentes to map out Knox Everett's entire operation. Her ledger contained names, dates, amounts, and phone numbers that connected Everett to 14 additional victims across Wright, Sherburne, and Stearns counties. Her burner phone records provided the communication trail the police had never been able to establish. Knox Everett was arrested on November 5, 2024, at his home in Zimmerman, Minnesota. He was charged with predatory lending, extortion, money laundering, and 14 counts of financial exploitation. 7 victims came forward within the first week. By the end of November, the number was 12. Deborah was granted full immunity. She testified before a grand jury in December. She was magnificent, calm, precise, detailed. The same organizational skills that had made her the best vet office manager in Wright County had also made her the most meticulous record keeper Knox Everett had ever encountered. Every dollar documented, every date recorded, every payment tracked. The prosecution called her records the most comprehensive documentation of a predatory lending operation we have ever seen. Deborah said, I was just keeping track of what I owed. But I knew the truth. She kept those records because she's Deborah. She keeps records of everything. The grocery budget, the vet clinic inventory, the annual fundraiser donations. It's who she is, and in this case, who she has turned out to be, the thing that brought Knox Everett down. Lyle entered treatment on October 20th, 6 days after the lake. His 4th time. I drove Deborah to the facility in Brainerd, 3 hours north. She sat in the passenger seat and cried for the first hour and slept for the second and stared out the window for the third. I didn't speak. There was nothing I could say that the silence wasn't already saying. At the facility, Lyle was waiting in the lobby. He looked the way addicts look when they've been using. Thin, gray, older than his 43 years, with the particular hollowness behind the eyes that I've seen before but never get used to. He saw Deborah and started crying. She walked to him and held him, and they stood there, brother and sister, holding each other in a lobby that smelled like disinfectant and coffee, and I stood by the door and watched. Lyles looked at me over Deborah's shoulder. I'm sorry, Perry. I know. I didn't want her to. I know. Are you going to leave her? I looked at him. This man who had consumed $94,000 of my family's money, 18 months of my wife's sanity, and 23 years of trust that I may never fully recover. This man who I had told 7 years ago that I was done with. This man who was standing in a rehab lobby for the 4th time, asking me if his sister's marriage would survive the wreckage of his addiction. No, I said, I'm not going to leave her. I didn't say it because I was sure. I said it because Deborah was standing right there, and she needed to hear it. And in that moment, being the person she needed me to be was more important than being the person I actually was, which was a man who had no idea whether his marriage would survive, but who understood, at some structural level, that walking away right now would be the equivalent of demolishing a building while people were still inside it. I'm a building inspector. I don't demolish. I assess. I identify the damage. I determine whether the structure is sound enough to repair, and then I repair it if I can. 5 months have passed. It's March 2025 now. Minnesota spring, which isn't really spring, it's late winter pretending to thaw, with dirty snow on the ground and a sky the color of old concrete, and a cold that gets into your joints and reminds you that this state doesn't give anything away for free. Deborah and I are still together. We're in counseling. Every Thursday evening, 6 p.m., Dr. Ingrid Solheim's office on Walnut Street in Monticello. Deborah sits on one side of the couch. I sit on the other. The space between us is measured in inches, but it feels like miles, and we spend 50 minutes every week trying to close the distance. Some weeks are better than others. Some weeks we talk about what happened and why and how, and we get somewhere, and the miles feel like they're shrinking. Other weeks we sit in silence, and the silence isn't the comfortable kind that 23 years of marriage builds. It's the cautious kind, the kind that happens when two people are afraid that the wrong word will crack something that's still setting. The money is a fact. $94,000 gone, savings wiped out, retirement damaged, a $30,000 personal loan still being paid off, $540 a month for the foreseeable future. We sat at the kitchen table in November and looked at the numbers the way I look at a building that's been through a storm. What's damaged, what's salvageable, what needs to be replaced entirely. We can rebuild it, Deborah said. I know we can. It'll take years. I know. Are you angry? I thought about it. I owed her honesty. We had agreed, in Dr. Solheim's office, that honesty was the foundation we were rebuilding on, and you can't build on a foundation you're still lying about. Yes, I said. I'm angry, not about the money. Money can be replaced. I'm angry that you didn't tell me. I'm angry that you spent 18 months carrying this alone, making decisions that affected both of us, hiding things from me in a safe that you planned to dump in a lake. I'm angry that you looked at our marriage and decided it wasn't strong enough to survive the truth. She was quiet for a long time. Was it? Was it what? Strong enough. If I had told you in March of 2023, when Lyle first called, that he had relapsed and owed $12,000 to a loan shark, and I needed to help him, would you have said yes? I looked at her. My wife. The woman who had spent her childhood protecting her brother from a drunk father, who had spent her adulthood protecting him from himself, who had spent 18 months protecting him from a predator while simultaneously protecting me from the knowledge that would have tested our marriage in ways I wasn't sure it could handle. No, I said. I would have said no. I told you, in 2017, that I was done. And if I had told you and you had said no, and Lyle had been hurt or killed by Everett's people because I didn't pay, don't. I need to say this, Perry. If Lyle had been hurt because I respected your boundary instead of saving his life, our marriage would have ended anyway. Not because of Lyle, because I would never have forgiven myself, and you would have been married to a woman who hated herself. I didn't respond, because she was right. And being right doesn't make it okay, but it makes it understandable, and understanding is the first step on the long road between where we are and where we need to be. Lyle has been clean for 5 months. He's still at the facility in Brainerd. He calls Deborah every Sunday. He calls me on the 1st of every month. The conversations are short, awkward. The conversations of two men who are trying to build something they've never had. Not a relationship exactly, but an acknowledgement that they are connected by. A woman they both love, and a history they both survived. Last month he said, "I'm going to pay you back, Perry, every dollar." Lyle, that's $94,000. I know what it is, and I'm going to pay it back, even if it takes the rest of my life. I didn't argue, not because I believe he will, history suggests otherwise, but because he needed to say it, and I needed to let him. Gentry came home from NC State for winter break. He knows some of it, that his mother helped his uncle with money problems, that it put stress on the family finances, that his parents are working through it. He doesn't know the amount. He doesn't know about the lake. He doesn't know his father sat in a sheriff's office at 5 a.m. believing his mother might have killed someone. Waverly knows less. She knows her parents are in counseling. She knows something happened. She's 18, perceptive, the kind of daughter who watches and waits and asks questions only when she's ready for the answers. She came to me last month while I was sanding a bookshelf in the garage, a project I'd been working on for weeks, my version of therapy, the kind of work where my hands do the thinking and my mind gets to rest. "Dad? Yeah? Are you and Mom going to be okay?" I stopped sanding, looked at my daughter, 18 years old, her mother's face, her father's stubbornness, standing in the garage doorway in her Monticello high sweatshirt, asking the question that every child of a damaged marriage asks eventually. We're working on it, I said. Is that a yes? It's the honest answer. We're working on it every day, and the fact that we're both still working on it means something. What does it mean? It means the building is still standing, and as long as it's standing, it can be repaired. She looked at me for a long time. Then she walked over, kissed me on the forehead, and went inside. She didn't ask any more questions. She didn't need to. She's a Blackwell. She knows that the important things aren't said. They're built slowly, with steady hands, one piece at a time. I'm sitting on my back porch right now. It's early morning. The March sun is low and weak, barely warming the air, but it's there. Deborah is inside, making coffee. I can hear the machine running, the sound it makes when the water hits the filter. A sound I've heard 10,000 mornings and never once thought about until recently, when I started noticing everything about our life with the heightened attention of a man who almost lost it. She'll bring me a cup in a few minutes. Black, no sugar. She's been bringing me coffee on this porch for 23 years, and the fact that she's still doing it, that she still walks out in her robe and hands me the mug and sits in the chair beside me and says nothing while the sun comes up. That fact is the most important piece of evidence I've collected in this entire investigation. Not the bank statements, not the ledger, not the dive team. Not pulling a sack out of Clearwater Lake at 4:52 in the morning. The coffee, the chair, the choice to stay. I watched my wife dump a black sack into a lake at 3 a.m. and I thought the worst. The worst wasn't true. The truth was something I never imagined. Not a crime of violence, but a crime of love. A sister bleeding herself dry to keep her brother alive, hiding the evidence not because she was guilty of something terrible, but because she was guilty of something human. She should have told me. That's the fact I come back to every morning. She should have told me, and I should have been the kind of man she could tell. Maybe I was, and she didn't trust it. Maybe I wasn't, and she was right not to. Maybe the answer is somewhere in between. In the space that 23 years of marriage creates, the space where two people know each other well enough to predict exactly how the truth will land and decide they'd rather carry it alone than watch it shatter something they've spent their whole lives building. I don't know. I'm a building inspector, not a philosopher. I know how to read a structure. I know how to find the cracks. And I know that a building doesn't have to be perfect to be worth saving. This marriage isn't perfect. It may never be perfect again, but it's standing. And as long as it's standing, I'm going to keep inspecting, keep repairing, keep doing the work that keeps the walls upright and the roof over our heads. That's what Blackwell men do. We notice things, we fix things, and we don't walk away from a structure that still has good bones. Now, I want to ask you something. What would you do if you followed your spouse at 3 a.m. and watched them dump something in a lake? Would you call the police, or would you confront them first? Would you assume the worst, or look for another explanation? And here's the harder question. Have you ever discovered that someone you love was keeping a secret, not to hurt you, but to protect someone else? Did the protection save the person they were trying to save? And what did it cost the person doing the protecting? Sometimes love looks like a crime. Sometimes the person who's drowning evidence in a lake at 3 a.m. is drowning it because they love someone too much to let the truth destroy what they've built. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying it's forgivable. I'm saying it's human. And human is the only thing any of us can be. Drop your answer in the comments. I read every single one. If this story hit you somewhere unexpected, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it, especially anyone who loves someone with an addiction and knows what it costs to keep them alive. Comment your thoughts below and subscribe to the channel so you never miss another story. I'll see you in the next one.